The joke is actually, this isn't a panel session. I'd like to introduce you and welcome you to All About GSX 2.0. It's a wonderful product, some great new enhancements. Virtualization, I know you guys know nothing about it yet, but you'll know exactly what virtualization is by the end of the session.
Great joke.
Yeah, all right. All actuality, thank you all very much for joining us again for another great installment of Ask the Experts, the vBloggers edition. This is the first of two we'll do here. We got picked up for a second episode, this VMworld, on Wednesday, I believe.
So this would be our pilot episode.
It's our pilot, so we'll work out the kinks. My joke will get better, I guess, by...
Let's hope so.
So, you guys know the name of the game. Actually, by a show of hands, who's this first VMworld?
Whoa.
Awesome. Wow, that is awesome.
Welcome.
Well, welcome. Are you guys enjoying it so far? Yeah? Great.
Cool.
It only gets better, right? Tomorrow, Tuesday is actually my favorite day of the week. The keynotes on Tuesday are typically a lot more techy, a lot more demos and things like that. So I'm anticipating a good general session tomorrow. So, but welcome to your first VMworld. And for those of you that have been with us before, thank you again for joining us. Typically the way this goes is the session's about you guys, right? We have a panel of industry experts that are here to answer whatever questions you have. It's not scripted, there's no PowerPoints, there's just you and us. And without questions from the audience,
this is going to be really slow.
Yeah, and awkward, right? So there's microphones placed in the walkways that you came down to sit. Please feel free to start making lines, because by the time I'm ready, I hope that there's at least one person there with a question. I didn't even prepare seed questions. I think we've gotten so cocky now that it's like, it's going to be a great session. People ask questions. I can ask some questions if we get to that, but I don't want to. So again, this is about you guys. Whatever you're working on, challenges you have, bugs that you've come across, exciting stories of coolness, even. Anything you want to share that we could talk about on stage would be great. There are some forward-looking statements. If we talk about future products or whatnot, no, I'm just kidding. So first we'll introduce our experts. I'll go through some ground rules and then we'll get right into it. So first, my name is Rick Scherer. I'll be the moderator for today. And let's see, 5 years with EMC as a principal SE on the vSpecialist team. So I focus on everything VMware. I'm a vCDX and I run a blog site called VMware Tips. And I apologize for really only blogging during VMworld.
Dude, you really have let it go.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to sell it.
Can I buy it?
That's right. Our first panelist to introduce is Mr. Duncan Epping.
Right, Duncan Epping, Chief Technologist working for the EvoRail team. It's actually the first time I get to say EvoRail up on stage, which is nice because I've been working on it for about 18 months. So I'm hoping we'll get some questions on that topic today.
I'm sure we will, because wasn't last year NSX?
Yep.
Every single question was NSX.
Yeah.
So this year will probably be a lot of EvoRail, which is good because it's an exciting product. Next, Mr. William Lamb.
Hey, good afternoon, William Lamb. Been at VMware for almost 3 years now. Work in R&D and staff architect. Do a little bit of everything, operational, automation, and yeah.
All right, great. Third, Mr. Scott Lowe.
So hello everyone, Scott Lowe. I work at VMware in the NSPU on the NSX team in the office of the CTO for the NSPU. And of course I've been blogging and writing and tweeting and all that. So thanks for coming.
All right. Finally, okay, so that's good. What's scary is I actually have to watch the line because he is my boss. But this is my session.
Yeah,
so.
it's all good. You're the man.
And our final panelist, Mr.
Hello, everybody. I'm Chad Sakac. I'm the SVP of Systems Engineering at EMC. So Any field nerds, any of my brothers and sisters anywhere in the globe are part of my SE family. I'm the author of Virtual Geek, and I'm a nerd myself. Go nerds.
Awesome. Go nerds. All right. So I'll hit up behind the podium here because I actually need to use a mouse for this. But here are some of the rules. I already talked a lot about how this works, but basically we're going to limit this to 60 seconds per response per panelist.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's going to be painful, Chad.
Yeah.
60 minutes maybe, but seconds.
Every other panelist like 60 seconds, no problem. Chad's like, ooh, all right.
A little verbose.
Everything goes, right? Some of us do work, well, 3 panelists work for VMware. If you want to show a hatred of a product, feel free. 2 of us work for EMC. Feel free to bash us as well. And if you want to bash any other vendor, feel free.
Even better.
Even better. Everything goes. This is, again, all about you guys. So with that, let's have some fun.
We have 2, I think,
We
already.
do have 2
At least
people
one
that were
sitting there waiting. So.
ready. So
All right, fire away.
So as a holdover from last year, this isn't an SX question. We all know NSX solves really big problems, you know, like if you're building the next Amazon, it's awesome, or really large problems. But what's the smallest production level NSX deployment you've seen, and what were kind of the requirements around it? And then on the flip side, have you ever seen NSX deployed in kind of a smaller enterprise or smaller service provider where it was overkill and the complexity was kind of outstripped the problem they were actually trying to solve?
So that's a fair question. You got your timer going? Okay, that's a fair question. If you focus on things like building, using overlay technologies to build virtual networks and logical networks and scale and API, you're right. Those aren't problems that typically smaller customers have to deal with. What we're really seeing in the smaller customer segment is around security, and the fact that with NSX and a vSphere environment, we can do distributed firewalling, so stateful firewalling at the VNIC level on every host with an in-kernel module that gives you close to 20 gigabits of throughput per host. So the microsegmentation use case, you heard Pat mention it in the keynote, is becoming very, very powerful for use case for a lot of customers, and we're seeing a lot of customers adopt it just for that. Like they want the microsegmentation use case. The rest of the stuff is just gravy. They can write their justification for pricing and implementation on the security benefits alone, right? So it's really about finding the right use case, the right business problem to solve, and then seeing what NSX will do to help you out. Does that help at all?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah, 8 seconds left.
Awesome.
to spare.
Dare
I
you
don't
roll
know
that
what
over
to
to
do
the next
now.
one? Yeah.
I think the smallest deployment.
Oh, sorry, Chad.
The smallest deployment I can think of off the top of my head, and again, this is all anecdotal, is still in the bands of they have many tens of vSphere ESX hosts. Many tens, but not in the hundreds bands. But I don't think that's intrinsic. And that's still, you know, a huge swath of the market is actually in that band. So, just for what it's worth.
Anybody else?
Not really.
Well, thank you very much for the question.
Thank you.
Our next question.
Looking at EvoRail and knowing you want to talk about it, yes. Seeing it, the first thought that jumps out at me is this is like SAP HANA started with one thing, then you end up allowing more. To me, EvoRail at first blush is a VCE, only a more multi-vendor approach, solution, you know, a little bit more open. Is that a fair interpretation or perspective on EvoRail?
So first of all, it's a very good question. It's a question that typically pops up with the customers that we've been talking to as well. So if you look at what VCE did, VCE basically created a converged infrastructure solution. And if you look at what Marvin or EvoRail actually is, and it used to be called Marvin, so if anyone has questions about that, they're both actually the same thing. Mm-hmm. But what we did is we built a hyper-converged infrastructure. Now, the converged word is already in the concept itself, so it's more or less the same thing. What we're aiming to do is simplify procurement and usability of products, as well as manageability, which is exactly the same as a regular converged infrastructure appliance. The only big difference is that if you look at the VCE approach, for instance, is you're typically looking at these large building blocks. So they're typically, you know, per rack or multiple racks even. And there's external storage included. If you look at the EvoRail solution, that's all contained within a single 2U unit. So conceptually speaking, yeah, the same. Implementation is different though.
All right. Anybody else like that?
So definitely. So I wrote a long blog about it. I'd encourage you, if you want to knock yourself out, go to sleep tonight. It's a good read. It's a long read. It's like War and Peace. People are going to lump all of these things to the same category, and it's a mistake. So it's very clear, by the way, vBlocks, they have an entry price band that no one talks about, but basically the entry price band is north of like 400K. It's big. So it's big, it's a rack, it's big economically. And EvoRail, its price band, I won't say a specific price because it will vary by the OEM partners, but it's designed to be start small, simple, space, U, et cetera, et cetera. However, they're different in the sense that one has got a economic scaling thing that looks like this. So that's the EvoRail scale, small little steps. The vBlock has got big step functions that look like this. But if someone comes and says, I need to deploy this SAP landscape on top of Oracle, and it's a 3-node rack configuration, and I'm going to need to replicate it between 2 data centers, you can't do it on any hyper-converged stacks. So I just think that they're all going to simultaneously exist.
I'll add a comment too. One thing, and this is not coming from a storage employee, this is actually true to the technology. I think when you have to look at any converged infrastructure, hyper-converged or normal converged infrastructure, the storage is actually dictating what it is,
Yep.
right? So, and the application should dictate what the storage is. So there's going to be some great applications that will run on EvoRails superbly, but SAP might not be one of those types of applications, right?
And it's not driven just by performance or availability because it runs on the vSAN stack, which is very performant and very available. It's other data services that may or may not be required.
All right. Next question on the side.
This is actually another NSX question. So the question is, I understand that NSX with using VXLAN can solve for the scenario where, let's say we have 2 VMs that we want to have talk to each other, and one is in data center A and the other one is in data center B, and they need to talk to each other for some horrible reason over layer 2 adjacency, but we only have a layer 3 network between them. So I understand that VXLAN solves that, but how do you solve for, let's say those are 2 data centers again, and we have a third location that's our customer location, and we want to solve for local egress, and probably even more importantly, local ingress. I know that you can solve for that with Lisp or certain other solutions right now, but does VMware plan to create a solution to solve for local ingress? Probably local ingress is more important than local egress. I know you can do some forced routing to solve for local egress in NSX today, but I guess the question is, do you want to solve for local ingress in NSX, or is that something you're going to leave to other partners?
So I'll answer that first by saying I can't comment on what we might do, right? But as soon as you step outside of a logical network, you are then bound by all of the limitations and rules and behaviors of a physical network. And that means that as soon as you step outside of a VXLAN or any other encapsulation-backed logical network, then things like routing, ingress routing, egress routing, you're going to have to address. Now, egress we can take care of. There are a number of design solutions that we've discussed, and I believe they're all documented in various reference architecture documents on the site. If you wanted to span a logical switch across 2 sites and have local egress, there are ways of doing that. Local ingress, as you correctly surmised, is a little more challenging because at that point we have to involve the rest of the network. So there are things you can do. It could be route tables. We can do dynamic routing integration with OSPF and BGP. It might be route integration. It might be Lisp. It might be some sort of global load balancing solution that directs traffic to one or the other, those kinds of things. But those are all kind of challenges with any sort of multi-site solution. This is not inherent to NSX. It just might become a little more prevalent because of the things that NSX enables. So I don't know if that answers your question. It's probably the best I can do at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. What a coincidence.
You love that. Like, look at the glee on your face.
Sweat the keyboard. Any other comments on the NSX question?
Come on.
Right. Yeah.
Really?
We'll go to this side now.
Okay, so I have a question again on EvoRail. So I understand it's not correct to compare VC with EvoRail because of the different price points. What I understand, but there was something in EMC, maybe it's a question for Chad,
Yep.
where we had this Nile, Project Nile. It was the commodity converged infrastructure. So how do you compare?
So that's a great question. And again, I'd encourage you guys to check out my blog post before I'm forced to get it pulled by EMC Legal, because I'm leaking stuff left, right, and center on there. So EMC's EvoRail appliance. So, and again, it's important to realize the product that EvoRail creates and enables is really the product from the OEM. Not just us, but the others that are part of the program. EMC's EvoRail appliance will use the same Phoenix server, which is a 2U form factor, 4 modules per 2U, which is part of the spec that we use in ECS. But if you think about basically what Pat said on SED, he said converged, he said common modular building block kind of things, hey, that's EvoRail, and then he described something else, rack scale architectures that VRack and Evo rack now. Again, when you're tied to the code names and stuff, you kind of stumble when the real name comes out. Evo rack is targeted at that. If you look at Evo rack, it's basically an ECS with generalized compute on top of VMware as part of that. So you can expect us not only to have converged infrastructure appliances, you'll see these common modular building blocks, our EvoRail implementation, but you'll also see us do stuff at rack scale as well. It comes from the OEM. EvoRail appliances you will not buy from VMware.
Yeah, maybe it's
So
good.
the question was, where does it come from?
Yeah, maybe it's good to clarify that. See, if you look at the announcement today, the announcement that we basically did is that what we actually built is we're not shipping hardware ourselves, but what we actually built is a build recipe. So what we developed is a piece of software that allows you to deploy a hyperconverged appliance within 15 minutes. Now, what we did is we created a program with all of our multiple OEM partners, and we're enabling them to actually start shipping those appliances. But if you want to acquire one of those appliances, you will need to go through your OEM vendor, so your preferred server vendor or storage vendor in this case. You can contact them to buy one of these appliances. So they're not sold through VMware. We built all the logic, we gave them the recipe, and they start building these appliances. And that's the key things here.
So when you say server vendor, in that case, like there's a line.
It's a good question.
So, by the way, it's a good question. If I were you, I would queue up and ask.
Maybe just to make one sentence about it. It's ECS minus VMware. That's all it is. So vSphere with packed with vSphere would be Rail.
I think you need to look past the product name.
Yeah.
Because all EMC's EvoRail implementation is using perhaps the hardware of ECS, but it has nothing to do with ECS.
Right. And the point is that, guys, this taxonomy, forget any vendor's product names, this taxonomy of products, some that are converged and designed for traditional applications with traditional data availability behaviors, that's the space that vBlock plays in. You've got common modular building block designs that EvoRail is in. That's really good because it starts super small, super simple, and can scale up. That's nice, right? But it doesn't have all the data services that you'd have over there. There's a third taxonomy, which is this taxonomy of rack scale architectures, where you see customers wanting a full-blown rack of something, and maybe even a data center scale. So you need to think about not how do you build a management tool like Marvin, now EvoRail Manager, but some abstraction that would manage many racks of common off-the-shelf hardware that could be constructed in a ton of different ways.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm really hoping this question from this side has something to do with automation or orchestration. Because William is amazing.
He's the man.
He's like,
man. So I guess it's not, but we'll go to him on the right side here.
EvoRail.
William,
really
you can
exciting
answer it.
announcement.
It's not that complex of a product. There can't be that many questions.
Perhaps the vagueness produces all the questions.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway,
Touche.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about EvoRail. I've been shopping systems like that for the last year. When I saw it, it screamed Nutanix to me, or Nutanix competitor. So can you get into specifics about, and maybe I'm wrong, but if I'm right, could you talk about the differentiators between your rail product versus Nutanix versus somebody throwing that stuff together, kind of together?
So, by the way, Nutanix and SimpliVity, to some degree Pivot 3, they're all examples of common modular building block architecture. They're in that same category, there's no doubt. And again, they're partners and respected competitors too, so nothing good or bad about them. What I would say as an OEM of EvoRail, the value proposition is going to be a combination of what VMware has constructed, the hardware that the OEM puts in it, and also the extra stuff that they add. I think that the strength of EvoRail across everybody relative to all the other players in this place is that VMware has hyper-coupled all of the licensing, all of the patching, all of the upgrading, all of the installing in a way that is unmatched in this market segment. The places where they'll have relative weaknesses are going to be in things that are associated with vSAN 1.0's behaviors, which is an ingredient inside that package, which some vendors may add to or enhance. Like ours, we've already telegraphed we will be adding Recover Point VM, which is pretty phenomenal DR and local protection on top of the appliance, just out of the box.
Will you throw in McAfee's security suite or anything like that?
So
stuff to go to Adobe to get
we'll acquire the McAfee guys and call it a day.
Duncan?
So to add to that, I think if you compare it to, for instance, the VCE model, so if you look at the EvoRail model itself, all of the licenses will be included within the single SKU as well. So if you need to procure a new box, you're actually buying not only just the hardware, but also all of the software components. So that means that vCenter is included, the licenses for ESXi, the licenses for vSAN, and additionally on top of that, all of the tools and components which the hardware vendors will add on top of that.
And Log Insight.
And Log Insight as well, by the way. And on top of that, if you start looking at it from a support perspective, you will also have one support contact number. So you won't be phoning up VMware and your storage vendor and your server vendor. You'll be contacting that single point of contact. So it's just one phone number you will need to dial up for support. So there's no more going back and forth between these different vendors to try to solve your problem.
And one more little thing. And again, people will need to decide whose appliance they pick on their own merits, right? This isn't the time to battle it out. One of the things that's a little in VMware's announcement and RGA of our appliance is, for us, we think it's a really big deal that the customers are going to expect that we'll be able to ship these to like Bangalore or Afghanistan or Paris or UK, because that's what they expect if they're going to buy something from EMC, which means we need to think about hardware manufacturing, parts, sparing, blah, 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 but also that they expect that if they call support and it's a single support model, it needs to tie into our EMC support systems for dial home and whatnot. So we have to add that stuff. So.
Great. All right, well, thank you for the question. Yeah. We'll jump over to this side.
Hey, I got a question about NSX. So I've been lucky enough to be on the front end of teaching NSX for the last 4 months as part of partner training and VMware employees. And as I go public with my NSX training, I'm getting a lot of questions about Cisco ACI. And I'm wondering what the best way to respond to those kind of questions are about how it competes and what some of the specific pros and cons are between one versus the other.
Whew.
I think I might need more than 60 seconds. So, you know, every product out there, every technology out there has, you know, strengths and weaknesses. And there will be, I would imagine, and I don't mean that in a negative way, I'm not as deep on the ACI piece as, say, maybe a Brad would be who's been focusing on that. There will be, I would imagine, some things that ACI will do very, very well that maybe NSX won't, right? Telemetry, chip level awareness, you know, per packet, you know, millisecond awareness of latency across the fabric, something like that, right? Oh, okay, that's fine, you know, cool, right? The reality is that most data center fabrics don't have these sort of issues. The vast majority of data centers out there don't suffer from horrible traffic congestion and horrible, you know, latency and all that kind of jazz. There are some large macro problems like elephant flows and mice flows that we can address very, very effectively at the vSwitch level. We do believe that having the edge of the network, and the edge today is the virtual switch. We do believe that the edge of the network is the best place to put the intelligence. It's the way networks have been designed for ages and ages, right? So pushing that intelligence down into the core just doesn't scale, and pushing it out to the edge is the best way of doing that. For that reason, that's why it was designed the way that it was. Naturally, customers who are VMware customers are going to benefit from deep integration from NSX into existing VMware products. So, and catch me afterwards, we can talk in more detail. I'm out of time.
Thank you.
I actually saw the counter going up this time.
Really?
I've never seen that before.
Crazy, I tell you, crazy.
How do I get some of that?
It's a soccer game.
Really weird.
Yeah.
All right, this side.
I have another question. It's actually not a technical question. It's for all the VCTXs on the panel. How would you recommend, what's the best way for someone who does not work for a VMware partner, so they work for a customer and they're going the VCDX DCV path, and they've already done VCAP DCD, VCAP DCA, working on their design, but not having access to some of those partner resources like Capacity Planner, the design, and or things like that.
So it's actually a question that comes up fairly often. A lot of our customers seem to be interested, at least architects working for customers seem to be interested in becoming a VCDX. And it's the first question that they typically ask me, can I get one of those design documents? Well, the fact is there's actually a whole bunch of reference architectures out there which more or less align with what we expect from a VCDX architecture document. I've been on the panel myself in the early days of the VCX, then I stopped doing that a while back. But some of the best designs that I've seen actually weren't based on the VMware templates. And the main reason for that was that, as soon as you start using a template, you tend to get lazy because half of the information is already in the template. So guess what? You're not going to replace it. You're not going to refine it. You're just going to use, some of the standard assumptions, some of the standard constraints. And as soon as people start challenging you, it will be really, really difficult to defend those design decisions or constraints or, some considerations. So don't worry about the templates. That's the first thing. Never ever worry about those because your documents are going to be far better than the templates we provide.
I would.
You're
Again,
not
I'm not.
Come on.
Why wouldn't you buddy up with someone who is and ask them for counsel and mentoring?
Yeah, that's another good point. I know there's a whole bunch of groups worldwide. So there's one in the UK. I think there's people doing it in Australia. There's people doing it in the US as well. You can buddy up with multiple people. They can help you doing mock defenses. They will review your design if needed. They can help you just throughout the whole process. But the key thing is just start doing it. Start building the design out. Have your colleagues looking at it because they know the architecture best, right? So they know what's documented, if it's actually correct or not. And let them start challenging you. Let them start asking you questions. Defend certain aspects of the design.
Yeah, I'd say if you're not involved already, get involved into things like vBrownBag, because through that channel, we actually do a lot of mock defenses for candidates, right? And just as long as there is no conflict of interest with the candidate or the mock panelists, we'll go through, critique their design, give them pointers, and also do the actual mock defense, which I don't know of exact success rates for people that we've helped out, but
it's
I would assume
high.
it's much higher than without.
At this point in the program, 4 years ago when everything were just getting kicked off, it was very difficult to understand what people were looking for in the program. The program's pretty well established. John Rashid does all kinds of boot camps and academy trainings, all that kind of jazz. There's tons of guys out there who have written about their experience, what to expect, what to look for. So, I completely agree with all the advice that's been given. Find somebody, there are lots of guys out there who are willing to mentor you, to walk you through mock defenses, to give you guidance on the exam, ask you questions about why you made the design decisions you did, what were the justifications, help you prepare mentally. So, yeah, there's tons of resources out there. Just dive in. Go for it.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck.
All right, over this side.
Howdy. Public speaking has never been my forte. So, question. My question is about ESXi's lack of HA protection around APD events. we currently had a situation where we basically lost storage to an enclosure, and all the VMs on that enclosure just went zombie, and there was no kind of migration through HA to another enclosure, and those VMs did not start back up. It's just kind of, it seems to be, you know, an issue. So I kind of came up with a script, threw it up there on the forums. But I was wondering if VMware had any effort towards kind of finishing up that component protection that they're calling it in HA. Otherwise, it's kind of the best effort to still use scripts to mitigate that.
You know, the funny thing is the component protection wouldn't have solved that problem either.
It would solve the APD problem.
You think
it actually
so?
would, yeah. That's actually what it's designed to do. I actually saw your script on the community forum. So first of all, thanks for sharing it. Because I think personally, I think it solves an issue for a lot of customers. So the APD issue is, you know, it's a big issue for a lot of customers. As soon as APD hits, virtual machines just sit there and they are zombied. With regards to the component protection, we're running multiple betas, as you know right now. So, you know, certain new functionality is definitely tested in those betas. I won't mention if component protection is part of it, but you know, you all can probably guess if it's part of it or not.
Yeah.
But hint. I won't mention when it's going to be released, but it's definitely something that we're aiming to solve in the near future. You know, everyone on the panel realizes that APD, PDL scenarios are the worst scenarios you can hit in any data center because they're just difficult and painful to mitigate. So we're definitely, you know, aiming to solve that.
Thank you.
Any comment, Chad? Or
yeah, go vSAN.
No. So, by the way, any storage stack has got bad failure scenarios, all of them, and vSAN's got some too.
Come on.
But the trick that always was sitting at the base of that design was saying, hey, should you immediately fail a device if the storage device gets unreachable for some time period? And there's cases where it's advantageous not to respond quickly, which is why there was originally this chill out and relax if the storage disappears for a little while. Now, obviously, looking at the component level, you can respond based on guest response and guest level behaviors, but that it still actually isn't changing the underlying question of if a storage thing disappears, how long do you wait before you do something? Again, I do think that doing something at the component level, and even if it's a script that does it manually or if it happens inside the product, it's certainly better than the way it works now.
And it's not an easy problem to solve as well, right? So if you have an APD scenario, it also depends on the type of scenario that you're hitting. You know, whether it's a cluster-wide scenario, if it's a single host that's impacted, or maybe your whole data center is impacted. You don't want to see all of your virtual machines go down when all of your data center is impacted, because then you'll need to start booting up stuff manually, which is, you know, I've been there before, and booting up, you know, more than 500 virtual machines manually, it's pretty painful.
But you could help it with automation.
Yeah, William can script it. William, how about scripting it?
So what type of script is right to do that?
No, actually, that's a great segue to that. So for the APDs, there's actually a bunch of different events, but the APDs specifically, we have these VOB events that are generated from ESXi within the VM kernel logs. Those actually could be trapped for vCenter server alarms. So I actually have a blog article that actually goes through a variety of these VOBs. And APDs are one of these events that you can actually track and create an alarm, which then execute a script, send an SNMP trap, or even an email. And you can actually take some proactive actions on migrating hosts or sending alarms to your NOC.
I don't know whether you guys would agree with this, but I would not advocate doing something automatically based on those events, because of this point of there can be a multitude of different things that might actually create those events, and you would want a different response if it was a localized thing to a host, to a cluster, or to a data center.
Yeah, that's the reason it took us, you know, this long to release a feature like that as well, because it's not an easy problem to solve. There's so many different scenarios that you can hit, and we need to validate against all of those scenarios.
By the way, I do love vSAN.
So do I.
All storage fails, man. Jump in.
Yeah.
All right, over this side.
Hi. It seems like with the announcement for Evo that VMware's taken a kind of diagonal approach or move towards hardware. Is there a reason why this diversion from their software products like vSAN, and I'm sure in the future
Not
VNS?
Really. I think it's the biggest confusion out there right now. So if you look at what we've announced that we created a build recipe for our partners. That's basically what we did. We built a piece of software that enables our partners to start building these hyper-converged infrastructure appliances. We won't be shipping any hardware. We just made recommendations in terms of what the hardware needs to look like. So from our recipe perspective, we expect that the hardware platform is a 2U platform that has 4 nodes. And because we're using vSAN, we also require, for instance, that there's a single flash device, an X amount of SAS drives, and you need to have a pass-through disk controller and a 10 gig networking card. But we're not, we're not in the hardware business, and we're probably ever not going to be in that business. That's not what VMware, is intending to do now or in the future.
I would ask everybody who's leaving this session to help us fix what is guaranteed to be a Preston analyst cluster. Because we'll leave with that impression, which is incorrect. Again, if you read my blog post, the first line says, I guarantee everybody will be confused on this. VMware is not a hardware vendor, period, full stop. They're doing what they've always done, created great software that the ecosystem uses to create the solution ultimately to the customer.
I guess if you need to compare it to anything, you can compare it when we started doing ESXi on USB sticks for OEM vendors, right? We enabled them to start shipping our software on top of their servers out of the factory. And that's the similar approach that we took with EvoRail.
Do you mind if I ask one more question from one of your points?
Go ahead.
You said that Evo is going to be using vSAN, so does that mean that you have to have 3 of these Evo units for vSAN?
That's why the requirement minimally is a 2U 4 module. So literally, if you look at any of the implementations, I'll speak about our own, the Phoenix server platform, literally in that 2U, has 4 ESX hosts.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, to the other side.
Hi, this is for William, I guess.
Yes.
Right.
But yeah, I love automation. You should never have to do anything more than once.
Yes.
So I've seen, like, from Power CLI, the progression it's made since the earlier days, that it's gotten more and more powerful, and it's actually started merging some of the commandlets. In 5.1, it had like stuff with the VDS was separated, and so with the current release of 5.5, it's converged those. I wrote a script recently to automate moving host all over to the DVS, and it actually won't create it. Or I haven't found something to create it. So
to create a VDS.
Yes, from the scripting level.
Maybe we should ask Alan Renouf.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know the exact Power CLI commands. We have done like the VDS ones and even the vSAN ones. Due to the release cycles, we want to try to get that stuff out sooner than later. So we may release them as a fling to kind of get that feedback early on and get customer feedback. And then once we get enough feedback, we'll kind of roll that back in. But to answer your question, there are commandlets to create VDSs, and I know even Luke has written something and Alan has something. I also have a blog article that goes through migrating from a standard switch over to VDS all in one flow, and it does go ahead and create the VDS structures and all the uplinks for you.
So what I was trying to get to is, like, to take it a step further, is like an orchestrator, I've noticed that you can call a PowerShell script, but there's no way to actually script directly in PowerShell or Power CLI. Will that possibly change? Or because from what I see, it's like you have to use like JavaScript or the other one.
So I'm not sure I understand the question. So I guess if we've implemented the commandlets,
say the orchestration, and you want to put a script into it. It's like, from what I can tell, you have to write it in JavaScript. It won't like.
So I think the question is around vCenter Orchestrator and the ability to use Power CLI inside vCenter Orchestrator.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, not call a PowerShell script.
Yeah, natively.
Natively.
Yeah, so there may not be a native VCO plugin module, but again, there's a lot of the guys from the VCO team that will take that feedback, and I can actually feed that back in, and they may create a workflow. It's actually simple enough. If you look at the output from the Power CLI script, you can actually take those methods and implement it yourself. So you're right, there may not be a default workflow, and maybe that's one that we can take back to engineering, where they can create a workflow that will completely do the migration for you, so that you don't have to call any external tooling.
I think you missed the question. I think correct me if I'm wrong, the question is, he wants to be able to write PowerShell script directly in the VCO workflow, not call a PowerShell script.
You can pull into the workflow a script, so you can go into that and edit that and actually write out the entire script into it. So I was wanting to know if they're going to add them, or could it be possible to request to add, can you, instead of having to write in JavaScript inside of the workflow, is that you can write directly into Power CLI?
I see what you're saying. Kind of changes a little bit of the architecture of VCO. Sort of, its underlying workflow engine is really JavaScript based. It is a very pluggable architecture, and so we can plug into Power CLI. I don't know if they're going to be changing that, because that's sort of the core fundamentals of how VCO works out of the box today for how the workflows are created.
It would just seem to me that that would be a fun black ops project for someone to create a standard wrapper around it, because you could basically create a little wrapper where you take all of the ins and outs of the. I can think of some people who would like that as a weekend project.
Yeah, Nick Weaver.
Yeah. Nick's pretty busy these days.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Another Evo Rail question. It's actually two parts. Number one, why are the limitation for the 4 appliances? Why wouldn't it scale larger? Is my first question. The second question is regarding licensing. You said that licensing is basically included and wrapped up. Are we going to see multiple SKUs as far as like if I'm going to go with VDI? As I understand it, there's going to be like supports 250 VDI deployments per box, correct? Up to 1,000, is that correct?
Yeah, let me answer the first question. I think Chad wanted to answer the second one or not.
Sure.
But the first question around why the limit is 16 nodes, testing, it's as simple as that. So we had a limited amount of time to start building this product, start working with our OEM partners, and then testing the product as well on their appliances. And basically, they didn't allow us to run more tests than we could do on a 16-node cluster. So I expect that limitation or constraint to be lifted in the very near future, because the product is ready for it. I mean, vSAN is the storage platform running underneath. We're using vSphere, regular vSphere HA and DRS clustering, and their limit is 32. So there's no reason we can't go up to 32, and when they go up, we'll be able to go up as well. So it's a pure testing, it's a testing limit. From a licensing perspective, so you mentioned the number of 250 desktops per block. So what we did is we did application type testing instead of just doing the gazillion IOPS number, right? Because that's what most of the vendors out there do today. Basically what we did is we decided that we would go with X number of desktops. 250 is the limit that we came up with based on the specifications that we had for those virtual machines. So your results may vary. Licensing is a totally different topic.
So your mileage may vary. It's been funny in having these conversations with customers. So literally they see the design spec and the positioning that shows how many VMs, how many VDI instances per module. And remember, a module is 4 ESX hosts, right? And they're like, I think that should not. And I go, look, it's a 12-core Ivy Bridge system with 256 gigs of RAM or 192 gigs of RAM. You know your VDI workload. Some people go, well, on that kind of host, I run 100 VMs. And I go, oh, okay. And some people go, I run 2 VMs. The answer is completely going to vary customer by customer. It's not hard encoded in any way, shape, or form. No one should think of it that way. I can say that I think that here it's important to realize that VMware will describe the envelope of the capability that they've created. How each OEM is going to do it is going to vary. I can tell you for a fact that we think that we need to have multiple Evo Rail flavors, because some people will want more dense memory, some will want less dense memory, mostly around VDI-centric use cases. So you can expect there to be multiple models of the appliance, from EMC at least. And I would expect from anyone else too.
And from the licensing aspect, because I expected the guy in the suit to actually answer that question, but from a licensing aspect, 250 is the number that we'll be going for, but there are going to be different flavors when it comes to certain SKUs for VDI, for instance. So we'll definitely be, making sure that we'll be hitting the sweet spots when it comes to View desktops, because that's a difficult market.
This isn't a suit, it's a blazer.
Whatever, dude. Come on.
Thank you.
All right, over here.
Howdy, guys. I work in what you might call micro businesses. They're running Essentials. They're running Essentials Plus, maybe Standard, if they've got 4 hosts. A lot of free stuff, a lot of running with vGhetto backups.
Yeah. Go William.
Go William. Where do you see those kinds of really, really small businesses in the future? Would it be best as me as a consultant to come in and keep them on-prem? Should I be pointing them towards Air? They're running their own exchange? Like, should they be going Office 365? These are some of the questions that come up with me, and they don't like change.
From my perspective, you need to do the costing analysis with your customers, obviously, determine what is the most cost-effective approach. But at this point, with things like email, there is very little value that I have seen for smaller companies to run their own email systems. Unless there is some, and you guys feel free to jump in if you disagree. Unless there's some sensitive security requirements or something of that nature, let somebody else take care of it. Let somebody else deal with the trouble of making it highly available and always available and that kind of jazz. So there's a lot of value in looking at, does it make sense financially? Again, that's the costing analysis for a customer to do an Office 365 hosted exchange kind of scenario instead of running it locally. As far as everything else, vCloud Air runs on vSphere. Again, you have to look at the costing analysis and see what is that customer paying to maintain that hardware for 3 years or 4 years or longer for small businesses. 8 years, right? Yeah, I've been there. I know how it is, right? So you have to do that cost analysis and see. But I think that we need to, from my perspective, we need to not be afraid to really look at moving workloads to vCloud Air.
By the way, the on-demand thing, Bill Fathers gave that 30 seconds in the announcement. That is freaking huge. Like previously, the entree into vCloud was a pretty big term and a pretty big material amount relative to other choices. The fact that there's now an on-demand model is not only a big achievement for the team because it's actually a hard problem to solve, but actually a big change in the go-to-market, just for what it's worth.
I guess the other thing to mention is there's the risk associated with making those changes as well. I used to work in the same space. A lot of my customers were small customers when I started out doing virtualization. First of all, a lot of them, moving them to the cloud, it ends up in something that they can't see, they can't touch. So a lot of them wouldn't feel comfortable with it. So would I suggest, recommend moving them out? Definitely not. Now, there's the risk associated with doing a move like that as well. Migrating from Exchange to a different mail platform can be pretty painful. So, do you want your customers to endure that pain? And, if you do want to have them go through that trouble, and if it's going to be challenging for them, they'll be looking at you as well. So, it will at some point come back. So that means there's multiple aspects, and sure, vCloud Air is a great platform and will probably work. But there are a lot of challenges when it comes to operating it, managing it, and then there's just the gut feeling that people will have with solutions like that. They need to be mature enough to be able to run on a platform like that, in my opinion.
I will say, though, I'm with you, Scott. The SaaS offers for so many offerings in the marketplace are getting pretty hard to compete with. Office 365 would just being one of them.
Yeah. I've oversimplified with just saying the costing analysis. There's obviously, Duncan's absolutely right. You want to look at risk, you want to look at maturity, operational maturity, are they ready, that kind of stuff. But I think a lot of us have this kind of inherent fear of moving workloads to the cloud because of horror stories around AWS and others. And fundamentally, vCloud Air, while a public cloud service, is not the same sort of architecture. And I think that it's really worth taking a look at for these customers to see if, from a risk, cost, maturity, readiness perspective, it's a viable option.
Would that be a good VCDX defense? Move everything to Air?
I think it'd be a first.
Definitely the first one, yes.
Don't steal my idea.
She says after she says it into a mic with cameras.
Yeah, too late. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have a less technical question, more of a personal question. I've been an admin for a long time, recently moved to a partner, been working on getting certifications, and I find myself, thanks to William, the wonderful home lab, I spend a ton of time at home working on educating myself, learning and reading, and I do this all at work as well. And sometimes it's hard for me to turn off. I'm curious, what do you guys do, right? I'm just a regular guy, but you guys have the jobs, you write books, you write blogs, you put in so much effort. Like, how do you, what methods do you use so that you don't just work?
Well, first of all, you need to buy your wife a lot of gifts. That's what I do. That's the only way you can pull it off. That's the only way. I've been in the same position. I think it was about 8 years ago, I used to work for a financial institution. I was a simple sysadmin doing some of the ESXi deployments, creating virtual machines. A couple of years later, I actually joined VMware as a PSO consultant. And I started doing a lot of stuff in the community forums. And I actually, I sat down with my wife and I had the discussion, it's going to take a lot of time and effort and a lot of hours, a lot of, Friday evening, Sunday, you name it, investing in my career, in my position within the industry. And no one knew me back then. And I spent literally a ton of hours, and she was okay with that. But, it's a discussion we need to have, because if people don't realize the amount of time it's going to take, then you're going to have a challenge at some point in time that it's not going to take long, because it eats up a lot of time. But, I get a lot of positive energy out of doing this as well. So it's worth it, in my opinion.
For me, my formula is, it looks like I'm running all the time, but I actually don't. So what occurs is I basically, first things first, I love what I do. Like the time off is actually, the learning piece is as fun and as exciting for me personally as the work thing. So like play is work, and they're not separate, they're kind of one thing, right? But eventually I burn out too, just like anybody else. We're all, like you said, we're all humans, no different than you or anybody. What I do is I basically run furiously and then I pause. So for a couple of days I actually slow my pace down, I work out a little bit more, I try to do something that's not work related just to get my brain a little reset. And then I sprint. And people get confused because they see the sprints, they don't see the pauses, and they just assume that it's a steady state thing all the time. I will say that I think for all of us, since we're now needing to absorb more and more, and the rate of change is happening faster, and the domains are all mashing up, including things that are developers' domains. The DevOps thing is making everybody need to learn development languages and fun. It's cool. It requires a very conscious mind to go, I don't want to fry myself out. I don't want to burn myself out. I don't want to burn my family. I need to think about my personal health, state, family, very consciously, because I've seen a ton of people completely cook themselves.
Let me add another thing to that, by the way. So when I said, give your wife a lot of gifts, the biggest gift you can give her is when you're on a date, you go out for dinner, whatever, put your phone away. Not only put it away,
That's right.
but switch it off.
Turn it off.
Because I always find myself within three seconds, streaming through Twitter, Facebook, Google+, LinkedIn, all the other platforms that there are. You'll end up doing that. So when you're with your kids, your wife, any other partner you have, switch it off. That's the biggest gift you can give them.
Yeah, that's
That's right.
I'm asking the question, right? I studied for my VCAT VCD. I took it yesterday and passed.
Woohoo!
Nice.
It's like we consume so much information all the time, and I guess the thing that you've answered and what I was looking for is that you guys turn it off too, right? Because here I am, I'm consuming your information all day, every day. I'm trying to walk my dogs and I'm thinking about, maybe I'm going to check the new Yellow Bricks post. Right?
You should. Don't turn that off.
What you use for trial software, specifically like VCAT, how can we test this without going through a partner?
I work for a partner.
How can you test?
You have a better answer?
How do you test VCAC without having it on-prem? I would say that the new cloud version of it is going to be a really interesting option for a lot of people.
Okay. So there's really no effort right now like we have to go and pull that down to 6 days.
So the observation around software accessibility, easy software accessibility, I'll tell you one thing, man. So while I am a nerd, in spite of the fact that I'm wearing my blazer, I'm part of the EMC exec staff. I'm pushing furiously, and I know people within VMware are doing the same thing to go, all the software needs to be really easily accessible, including things beyond the base stuff. And I'm pushing that like crazy, going, look, the driving rule should be, you can't make a support call, but otherwise, it's never going to time out, never going to time bomb, never going to blow up, not feature limited or restricted. I think that we should just have, as software vendors, we should have a trust and faith that basically people won't do stupid stuff and put it in prod. Because frankly, if they do and they call support, they're going to go, hey, it's not a supported product, you should buy it. I'm pushing like crazy. Long way to go, though.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
All right. So
it's a great segue, actually.
my question is actually around that product. And I know you can't comment, internally, but so the push, for instance, to provide that vCake as a service, essentially, was that motivated, that particular product, to help speed adoption rates?
Complexity of deployment.
I didn't want to say it, but has anyone tried deploying it, VCAC?
Right, I mean, that's exactly what I'm...
Who felt it was difficult? Yeah, sure. That was one of the reasons, obviously.
And really, you could kind of extend that to a lot. I mean, like Chad just said, I mean, the complexity rates of the types of things you need to know to really be able to support an entire enterprise or design for an entire enterprise is just getting so deep and so wide that it's becoming hard to keep up. So for vendors such as yourselves to...
I got to tell you, that's the big macro level driver, guys, that is actually driving hyper-converged infrastructure as a service stacks. So you could take the idea of hyper-converged infrastructure stacks and go, if we could do that and then just point to vCake in the cloud to that target, hey, that would help. It's the other driver, which is frankly driving customers towards public cloud offerings where it's somebody else is taking care of the mess. Our view fundamentally, at least, again, when I say our here at this stage, I'm always saying it as EMC, but I would suspect that my VMware brothers and sisters might agree with me on this. I think that basically if we do believe that there's workloads that should stay on-prem for economic, for compliance reasons, for those sorts of things, we have to make that value proposition as easy to get, ultimately, as getting it from a service provider. Otherwise, artificially, they move. There's a long way to go, I think, for us to make the stuff on-prem as easy as it should be.
I mean, the other thing you have to keep in mind, too, is that, vCloud Air is strategically important for VMware. So, I mean, it makes a lot of sense for the company to begin offering products like, VCAC, aka vRealize automation, right? Available as a service to its customers and potential customers.
It also gets a little more threatening, I guess, to some of the partners in terms of cannibalization.
Just for what it's worth, the partners that I see really taking off in funky ways remain good at the infrastructure stuff, but they're picking up new skills around M&O, management and orchestration and automation skills. They're picking up weird new skills in OpenStack. They're getting good at DevOps, and frankly, many of them are getting better at the world of PaaS, on-prem and off-prem, right? I do think that the game is changing for people within enterprises, whether they're large, medium, or small, or whether you're a systems integrator partner, the game is changing. There's still a ton of value to add, and basically the value comes out of having good gray stuff between your ears. It's just what is valuable is shifting.
All right. I do have to take exception to Chad's comment that OpenStack skills are weird. Just for the record.
All right, so we have time for probably one more question. I apologize. We'll take it from this side. However, I do want to invite you guys. We're doing a repeat of this, so if your question wasn't answered or you have questions that you think about,
use Twitter.
And we'll make sure, guys, the people in line, we can make sure that if they come
we'll
to
be
the
here
thing,
after.
We'll pull them in afterwards, and if they come,
there's no session after us.
Yeah.
I'm trying to advertise our repeat.
Oh, sorry.
It's already fully booked.
So Wednesday, I had it open and it closed. It's at the Marriott Marquis Yerba Buena level, Salon 7 at 4 p.m. So feel free to come visit us then if you have any questions. Otherwise, also we will be here after the fact to answer any questions when the session's over. But with that, our final question.
Okay. A lot of backup products use the change block tracking to facilitate quick backups. Are there any efforts to improve the handling of CBT corruption? Any more graceful methods, automatic methods?
How can you answer that?
I think that the answer is I think the way I'd answer it, again, this is a VMware thing, but we certainly depend on CBT. So, and the things that we do separately and even the things that we do together in partnership like VDP and VDPA depend on it. I think it's a known problem that needs to be better.
It's a known problem for sure, and I can tell you that the engineering team is looking to solve this problem. Yeah. When they do it and how they do it, I actually don't know, because I'm not really close involved with the CBT team, to be honest. So it's something I haven't been involved with in the last year or two even. So
there's some weird poking around with vVols going, could we tackle it, the snapshot mechanism that is the underpinnings of pieces of that in different ways, but it still is too undetermined to say here and now. But the first step to fixing a problem is to say, it works, but there are known problems.
So before we end the session, by the way, has anyone been to the hang space? So at the hang space, what you can do, you can throw a a paper airplane, and if you throw a paper airplane based on the number of the distance, they will actually donate money. So I would like to encourage everyone to go out to the hang space after the session, throw a paper airplane, and let VMware start donating money to several charities, and they are around children, women, girls. They're doing things all over the space, environmental things. So make sure to visit the hang space, throw the airplane, and let VMware donate $250K to charity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Woohoo!
Great.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.